Okay, today's lesson is finding equations of lines, and we feel like we've been doing that for a whole chapter, but this will take on a different look because of the information that's given. So we'll jump right in with a question to show you what we mean. Chantal and Ashley were working on a math problem involving equations of lines. Unfortunately, Ashley's pen exploded and the y-intercept value was completely covered in ink. And you can see it there. Y equals 5/6 x plus something. There was some number there. The only other information they could remember about the line, and I'm going to get my highlighter ready here, was it passed through the point 504, 432. Use this information to help Chantal and Ashley recover the line's y-intercept. Now, this is a fairly dramatic example that isn't very realistic in how it's laid out. However, it is realistic to say that there will be situations where we want to know an equation of a line and we only have some of the information that we need, and we have got to figure out the rest of it. So in this case, we've been given the slope, but we don't have the y-intercept. Now, I'm going to act like I don't really know what's going on here. And I'm going to say, okay, well, if I'm looking for the equation of a line, I know I need y equals mx plus b. That's always going to be true when I'm doing the equation of a line. The equation of a line will be y equals mx plus b. And the reason I'm writing that down is just to prepare for later examples. This particular example, you might not have wrote y equals mx plus b. You might have wrote y equals 5/6 x plus b, because we already knew what the slope was. That we still know what the slope is. It's still there on the page, 5/6. So I'm sort of setting up for later examples. If we write down y equals mx plus b and then fill in the things we know, we'll have made good progress. And this is really good progress. Even putting that b there really makes good progress. Now, this is the big moment in these questions. If you understand what I'm about to do next, you won't have much problems with these questions at all. The difficulty is that there's three unknowns in this question. There's y, there's x, and there's b. And we really want to know what b is. If we're going to be able to write the equation of this line, this b is what we're trying to find out. Okay, there's only one way that can happen. There's only one way we'll be able to find the b, and that's if we know an x and a y we can put in there. So to be able to get the b, we have to have an x and y to use. And that's exactly what's been given in this question. Let me put a big circle around that. It's so vital that this is what we use. And I'm going to write a sentence that will really help frame what I'm going to do next. And this sentence I think you'll find very helpful. So I encourage you to write it down. This point here is saying when x equals 504, y will be equal to 432. Well, what I can do now is just actually in my equation, make the x 504, make the y 432, and find the b that makes that work. We know the equation of the line is going to produce this point. We need the b that's going to make that happen. So if I put the y value in as 432, and I put the x value in as 504, do you see what's happened to my equation? This equation that was very, very difficult, it had y's and x's and b's right here, and all these unknowns. By subbing in the x and y, suddenly I don't have all these unknowns. I only have one unknown b. Now that doesn't make what I have to do next easy necessarily, but it does make it possible to find the b value. What I've got to do is I've got to multiply 5/6 times 504, so I'm going to put the 504 over a 1, so that I can go numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, get out my calculator and type that in. I get 2520, and the bottom is 6 times 1. And when I divide in this particular question, it's not actually a fraction. When you divide 2520 by 6, you get 420, which is a nice whole number. And you'll find that lots of the homework questions do that. They don't stick you with fractions. When you actually sub it in, you end up with some whole numbers. And so I'm going to move the 420 over, and I've got my b. The b is equal to 12. So therefore, the y-intercept was 12. And I really want to put this into a procedure, and I'm going to switch to another color here, like an orange highlighter. And what was the procedure? 1, we wrote down y equals mx plus b. 2, we subbed in what we knew. 3, we subbed in a point. And 4, we solved for an unknown. And that procedure, that 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm not saying that works every time, but it's a great starting procedure on how to solve for m's and b's that we don't know in the question. Now, this question was rigged up so that graphing would be very, very difficult. Points like 504, 432, that's very, very difficult to set up a graph to solve these out. Graphs can be very valuable, and they can solve a lot of these questions, but you only want to rely on those for very small numbers and very regular numbers. For big numbers or for decimals, anything like that, you want to have algebraic procedures like this. But just to go back and show you what I mean by you can do some of these questions with graphing, here's a couple examples, or here's an example that says use a graph, and it says use a graph to determine the equation of a line. Now, this line has slope -3 and passes through 5, -9. Well, I could sort of do the procedure I just did, and I could write down the equation y equals mx plus b, and then sub in what I know. And here I know the slope is 3, or -3. So I get -3x plus b. And just like the last question, my goal is to find out what the y-intercept is. And I could sub in like I did in the last question. It is possible to graph, though. What I'm going to do is graph the point 5, -9, which is right about there. And my goal is to figure out what the y-intercept would have been to end up at 5, -9 with slope -3. So what I know is this line's going down by 3 every time. So if it was going down by 3, it must have started up at -6 when it was at 4. It must have been at -3 when it was at 3. It must have been at 0 when it was at 2, and then at 3, and then at 6. You have just mapped that backwards using the slope of 3, saying, okay, well, I've got to be going up 3 every time. And using that procedure, I can see what the b is going to be right there. It's going to be y equals -3x, and this y-intercept is 6. So you see the graphing way has a very visual approach, and you can really see what's happening and how you're getting these values. It just doesn't work very well when the numbers get big. However, here's another one that can be done, and I'll switch to green here. Here's another one that can be done using a graph. It says passes through the point -6, 6, so I'm going to put that on my graph, -6, 6, right there. And 3, -9, so down here, 3, -9. So there's my line, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to first find that slope using the graph. I'm going to draw that rate triangle. I'm going to reach way back into last chapter when we found slopes this way, as we said, okay, how much was the rise? It went down 15. And how much was the run? The run was 9. So my slope is -15 over 9, which I'm going to reduce to -5/3. That really helps me to build the equation of line. See, I start with my y equals mx plus b, and now from the graph, I've got the slope, -5/3. And now I need the y-intercept. But what I'm going to do is use this slope, -5/3. So it goes down 5 over 3, down 5 over 3. You could also have drawn it with a ruler, whichever way works, just connecting up those 2 points. But then I found my y-intercept. See, there it is right there. I'm going to draw a really big dot there. So now I know it's y equals -5/3 x, and that's a subtract 4, or a -4 there. So the nice thing about graphing is that you can really see what's happening and you can really walk your way through it. But again, I want to say again, the graphing is not the end-all and be-all, because if the numbers are very big or if they go into decimals, graphing becomes sort of inaccurate and very difficult. So the rest of the examples I'm going to do here are without using a graph. And I encourage you to come back to this part of the video when you're doing your homework. If you're having trouble with a certain type of question, come back and check, because I think I'm going to cover just about every type of example here that can happen. So if you're having trouble with a homework question, come back and watch this video. Okay, so I'm going to try and do those 4 steps I mentioned every time. In some questions I'll need all those steps. Other questions I won't necessarily need all the steps. Okay, so this one. It says, determine the equation of a line that has slope -7 and y-intercept -12. So I'm going to write down my equation of a line, y equals mx plus b, and I'm going to fill in whatever I know. That's my step 2. My step 2 is fill in whatever I know, what they give me. Well, they give me the slope. Oh, and they give me the y-intercept. Okay, so easiest question of the day. If they give you the slope and the y-intercept, you can just sub them in there. That's really just a test to see if you know what y equals mx plus b is and how it works. So that's sort of a review of that. Normally the questions won't be that easy. Next one. write down y equals mx plus b. Then sub in what I know. It says, has a slope of 5. Oh, I'm off to a great start. I know the slope is 5, so I'm going to put a 5 right there. And then it says, passes through the point negative 4, 17. That's not the y-intercept, so I don't know the y-intercept. And here's the big part of the lesson right here, is to go, okay, so what am I going to do? If I don't know the b, but I do have a point, what I have there is an x and a y. And I'm going to write this fancy sentence that I think is going to be very helpful in your understanding of why these questions work where they do, is that point negative 4, 17 means when x equals negative 4, y is equal to 17. And I can put those into my equation. I can say, okay, a y value of 17 goes with an x value of negative 4. And you see what I'm left with is an equation that doesn't have a whole bunch of x's and y's in it anymore. I'm left with an equation that only has b's in it, which I can solve for. And so a little bit of math here. 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. Bring that 20 over, switches to adding, and I get b equals 37. So always state your equation at the end here. So y equals 5x, and now I found out that the y-intercept is 37. What's nice about these questions is you can check them so easily. You just take y equals 5x plus 37 and sub in this point negative 4. And I get negative 20 plus 37, and I get the y value of 17. You see, when I subbed in negative 4, I got the 17, and that's a great way to check your answer. So on a test or an assignment, unlike when you're doing your homework and you check the back of the book, here you can just sub it in and check it. All right, let's try another one. I'm going to try and do the same steps every time. It says it has a y-intercept of 8 and passes through 11, negative 3. So I write down my equation. Y equals mx plus b. And I fill in what I know. This time, they don't give me the slope. They give me the y-intercept. So I don't know the slope, but I do know the y-intercept this time. So now, the big moment of the lesson, I think, is that when you don't know one of the m or the b, what you need is this xy pair. And I'm going to write that in a sentence. When x equals 11, y equals negative 3. And that it basically just tells me what to do. It tells me that I should put in negative 3 for y, and I should put in 11 for x. And what I've done is taken the equation that had a lot of stuff in it, x's and y's and m's and b's, and now it suddenly doesn't have all those things anymore. It only has m, which is what I want to find. I had the b, I want to find the m. So now a little bit of algebra here. Bring the 8 over, and I get negative 11 equals 11m. Divide both sides by 11, and I get the m is negative 1. Now I have my equation. The m was negative 1, so now I know it's negative 1x plus 8. Maybe you'd write just negative x plus 8. Either way is fine. The second one is what you'll see more often. Okay, next question. I'm going to try and follow my steps every time. Y equals mx plus b. Sub in what I know. Do they give me the slope? No, they don't give me the slope. Do they give me the y-intercept? No, they don't give me the y-intercept. Okay, so now I'm sort of stuck. So I said that those 4 steps would get you every time, and this is the one particular example where you need one more big friend. They don't give me the slope, but I can find it using this old friend. Such an important equation last chapter, still important in this chapter. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what I'm going to do is label these points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, and find that slope. 28 minus 7 over 12 minus 5. The m is 21 over 7. I've got an m of 3, and that's very helpful. Now I can go back to what I was calling step 2, which is I can therefore now go, oh, y equals not mx plus b. I know the slope is 3 this time, and I get y equals 3x plus b. So from there, then, I still need to know the b, so then I go, okay, when x equals 5, y equals 7. That's using that point right there. Actually, you can use 12, 28. It's just bigger numbers. You'll get the same answer, weirdly. And if you don't believe me, try it. Go ahead, sub in 12, 28, and you'll find if you do the algebra right, you'll get the exact same answer I'm going to get here. So what I said was if x is 5, y has to be 7. So the y has to be 7, and the x has to be 5. And that allows me to get b in an equation all by itself. A couple of steps later, I get my b value, and I go, therefore, y equals, okay, the slope. I got to look back here. Where was the slope in this question? Oh, I found it down here. There's the slope. So what I got is y equals 3x, and then the y-intercept. Oh, I just found that now. There's the y-intercept. So I get y equals 3x minus 8 is the equation. And you can check that into both. Like if you look at the x value, if you go 3 times 5 minus 8, you get 7. If you go 3 times 12 minus 8, you get 28. So you can sub those numbers in very quickly and check that answer very nicely. Okay, I think that's the toughest example of the day because the other examples, you wrote down y equals mx plus b, you subbed in what you knew, subbed in the point, and you got your answer. This one, when you're given 2 points like that, that's the one question that has an extra step in it that you're going to have to use the slope formula to find the slope before you even start that procedure. Okay, so that's an important question. Okay, a couple other examples to prepare you for other possible situations that can come up. I'm going to try and follow my procedure every time. I'm going to say, okay, write down y equals mx plus b. Then fill in what you know. Did they give me the slope? No, no slope. Oops, my screen did something there. No slope, so I'm going to write mx. Did they give me the y-intercept? Yes, they did give me the y-intercept. And so now, from other questions, what we did at that point is we took a point and subbed in the x and the y. Now, they gave me a point here, but this is a little tricky because they didn't exactly tell me the coordinates of the point. They just told me it was an x-intercept of -5. And let's talk about what an x-intercept of -5 is. That means there's this point out here somewhere on the x-axis at -5. Well, I can turn that into coordinates pretty easily. That means it's the point -5, 0. So just a little bit of thought there to think about what this point is. And now I'm ready for my sentence. When x equals -5, y equals 0. Maybe you knew that already. You know, we said it a lot of times. For x-intercept, y equals 0. And so that maybe that's another way that you remember it. But I like the little graph here. Okay, so I'm subbing those things in. Y value 0 with x value -5. And so I get -5m plus 16. This time I'm going to move the m over because it's negative. I just find that a little easier. It was negative on that side, so it's positive over here. And then I'm going to divide by the 5, and I get my m there of 16/5. And so now I'm ready to state my equation. Therefore, y equals 16/5 x plus the y-intercept, which was 16. So a little bit of thinking, extra thinking, that had to go into that one because of them giving me the x-intercept. Okay, and just to wrap up, one that you'll see the most often, and very carefully with the steps here on the last one. So if you're at the end here, you're going, okay, I sort of get it. I'm ready for the homework, but I really want these steps really regimented for me. Here's the steps very, very regimented. 1, write down y equals mx plus b. All equations of lines look like y equals mx plus b. So I can just write that down and say, this is what I'm looking for. I'm after the slope, and I'm after the y-intercept. 2, sub in what they give you. Anything that they actually tell you, put that right in right now. It says it passes through 12, -18 with a slope of 3/4. So they gave me the slope. They didn't give me the y-intercept, but they did give me the slope. So I'm going to put that right in there. And suddenly my y equals mx plus b isn't nearly as complicated because I've got the slope in there. 3, sub in a point. I'm going to say this sentence. When x equals 12, y equals -18. So I can put in y equals -18 with the x value of 12. Now there's a little bit of fraction work here, so I got to put that 12 over 1. so that I can go numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. But a lot of the questions don't really work out to fractions. They set them up nicely so that what I actually get is, oh, I don't know why I wrote a 9 there. That's a 4. A lot of these questions work out to nice whole numbers, even though they look like they're going to be fractions. So negative 18 minus 9 equals b. Therefore, b equals negative 27. Therefore, y equals 3/4 x minus 27. Okay, so there's the sort of the 4 steps that I do there is I sub that in and then I solve for what I'm missing. Most of the questions, like I say, those 4 steps will work very well. Write down y equals mx plus b, sub in what you know, and then sub in a point. That's usually the procedure. The only one that's different is when it's 2 points. Okay, so when you get 2 points like this one up here, you're going to have to find that slope first using the slope formula. Okay, definitely practice these, folks. These are not the type of questions you just look at and go, oh, I get that now, good, and just move on. You really have to practice it so that it becomes second nature to you, how to do this procedure, okay? So take a run at that homework. I think you'll find that if you follow the video very carefully, you won't have too much trouble. Have a great day.